They said no maid ever lasted in the mansion on Bishop Attaboy Dealey. Not one. The gates were grand, the cars were polished, and the marble floors shone like frozen lakes. But inside? Inside was a battlefield, and at the heart of that battlefield was a queen named Madame Rose. She was beautiful, polished, and her words were weapons. She had broken 9 maids in 6 months. Some ran away, crying in the dead of night. One jumped the back fence, leaving her shoes behind. They all broke. Then, one morning, Naomi walked through that same grand gate. She was quiet, dark-skinned, and carried nothing but a small nylon bag and a fire in her eyes that no one could see. She wasn't there to run. She wasn't there to please. She had a sick daughter, a mountain of hospital bills, and nothing left to lose. And she carried a secret weapon that Madame Rose, for all her wealth and power, had never faced before. A silence that could not be broken, and a spirit that had already been through the fire. What Naomi did in that house didn't just change her life. It would break the unbreakable Madame Rose and heal a home that was dying from the inside out. The mansion on Bishop Attaboy Drive was a masterpiece of architecture and a monument to silence. Past the towering black gate and the flawless driveway where cars gleamed like black diamonds, the air within the house was heavy, still, and cold. The staff moved like ghosts in their own home. The cleaner kept his eyes glued to the floor. Even Mama Ronk, a chef who had once cooked for presidents, measured her steps in the vast kitchen as though a single loud footfall could shatter the fragile peace. That silence had a source, a name whispered in the staff quarters but never spoken aloud in her presence: Madame Rose Richards. At 33, she was a vision of curated perfection. Tall, fair-skinned, and always dressed in flowing silks, as if a red carpet might materialize beneath her feet at any moment. Her perfume was a sweet, expensive cloud that announced her arrival, but it was her words that lingered sharp and cold long after she had gone. She did not give instructions, she issued decrees. She did not discipline, she broke spirits. A sudden, stinging slap for a misplaced coaster, a sentence sharp enough to leave an invisible wound that would fester for days. In the kingdom of this mansion, her opinion was law, her mood was the weather, and her displeasure was a storm that everyone ran from. She was Mr. Femi Richards' second wife, a man whose power in the world of oil and gas was legendary. He was nearly 60, a titan of industry, but in his own home he was a quiet shadow, orbiting the fiery sun of his young wife. It was into this cold, silent battlefield that Naomi arrived. No one greeted her. They were tired of learning names that would be gone by the weekend. The housekeeper, a weary woman with tired eyes, simply pointed to a mop. "Start with the marble floors. Madam is coming downstairs." Naomi didn't argue. She tied her headscarf, a faded piece of Angora cloth, picked up the mop, and began to work. Each smooth, steady stroke was a prayer, a mantra. Just endure it. For Debbie, her daughter, Deborah, was her world, a gentle 9-year-old girl whose smile was the only light in her life, and whose heart was failing. The hospital bills were a rising tide, threatening to drown her. 3 months, Naomi whispered to herself. 3 months' salary, that's all. Endure everything for 3 months. She was still wiping the grand central rug when she heard it. Click, clack, click, clack. The sharp, imperious sound of expensive heels on marble. The sound stopped. Naomi looked up. At the top of the grand staircase, bathed in the morning light, stood Madame Rose. She wore a wine-colored silk robe, holding a cup of tea like a scepter. She surveyed Naomi with cold, dismissive eyes, then glanced at the mop, and then at the bucket of water beside her. Without a word, she descended the stairs, and as she passed the bucket, she casually, deliberately tipped it over. Water splashed across the pristine tiles. Naomi gasped, stepping back. Madame Rose paused and leaned in close, her voice a low, cold hiss. "This is the third time this week someone has blocked my walkway. I am not in the mood. Clean it, now." Naomi did not speak. She simply bent down, picked up the mop again, her slippers now soaked, her heart a steady, determined drum. From the hallway, the housekeeper whispered, "She won't last. She's too soft." But they didn't know Naomi. They didn't know that she had buried her, pride years ago in a pauper's grave alongside her husband. They didn't know she had begged doctors in hospital corridors, cleaned homes where she was treated far worse, and faced down the terrifying specter of her own child's death. Naomi wasn't soft. She was a silent, controlled fire. The next morning, Naomi rose before the birds, before the first call to prayer echoed through the Lagos air. She swept the front yard, cleaned the glass doors until they were invisible, and mopped the sitting room again. This time with less water, no splash, no mistakes. By 6:30 a.m., she was in the kitchen beside Mama Runk. The old cook looked up, surprised. "You are up early." Naomi smiled gently. "I'm just trying to do my work." Mama Runk sighed, shaking her head. "Ah, my child, be careful. Survival in this house is not measured by how early you wake, but by how you endure Madame's mouth." As if summoned by her name, the soft, controlled, angry sound of silk slippers approached. Madame Rose entered the kitchen, her robe tied tight, her face a mask of irritation. "Where is my lemon water?" she asked sharply, her eyes scanning the room. Mama Runk rushed forward. "Good morning, Ma. I was just about to—" "I wasn't asking you," Madame Rose cut in, her gaze landing on Naomi with pinpoint accuracy. Naomi wiped her hands on her apron and bowed slightly. "I will get it now, Ma." Madame Rose narrowed her eyes. Room temperature. Not cold from the dispenser, not warm from the kettle. "Let it sit for 10 minutes, 2 thin slices of lemon, no seeds. Do you understand?" "Yes, Ma." "Because if I take 1 sip, and it is not perfect, you will regret the day your mother gave birth to you." "Yes, Ma," Naomi repeated, her voice calm. She prepared the water with the focus of a scientist, her hands steady, her feet quiet as she carried it up the marble stairs. She knocked gently. "Come in." The room was a temple of luxury. Gold curtains, gleaming perfume bottles, and a small white dog sitting on the vast bed like a tiny king. Naomi placed the tray on the side table. Madame Rose took the glass, sipped, and paused. Naomi's heart, for the first time, beat a little faster. Madame Rose smirked. "You're lucky," she said. "You got it right." But as Naomi turned to leave, her voice, sharp as glass, cut through the air again. "There's a stain on the bathroom sink. I hate stains. I'll clean it now, Ma." As Naomi entered the opulent bathroom, her eyes caught a faint rust-colored stain on the white marble sink. She reached for the cleaning spray and began to scrub, gentle and focused. Then a soft thud. Her shoulder had brushed against a tall, crystal perfume bottle. It wobbled precariously. She caught it just in time. her breath catching in her throat. A quiet sigh of relief escaped her. But when she turned, Madame Rose was standing in the doorway, her arms folded, her eyes cold. Without a word of warning, she strode forward and slapped Naomi hard across the face. The sound echoed in the marble bathroom. Naomi's head snapped to the side with the force of the blow. "You're clumsy," Madame Rose said, her voice devoid of all emotion. "I don't like clumsy people in my home." Naomi's cheek burned, her eyes stung with unshed tears, but she did not cry. She simply bowed her head and whispered, "I'm sorry, Ma." Then, with hands that trembled only slightly, she gently picked up the perfume bottle and placed it back in its perfect, shining line with the others. Her spirit, though assaulted, remained steady. "You'll clean the guest rooms next," Madame Rose said, her back already turned as she sank into her bed, phone in hand. "And iron the bed sheets while they are on the beds. I don't like creases." "Yes, Ma," Naomi nodded. As she stepped out of the room, her cheek still throbbing, she saw Mr. Femi standing in the hallway. He was a tall man, his face calm, his neatly ironed agbada a testament to his status. He had heard everything. Their eyes met for a fleeting second. Naomi saw a flicker of something in his gaze pity. But she didn't need pity. She needed a salary. She walked past the master of the house without a word and went straight to the guest rooms. Because in Naomi's heart, one thing was clear. She would not run. She would not break. Not until her daughter could live. By the third day, the entire house was watching. Naomi hadn't cried. She hadn't shouted. She hadn't packed her bag and run like the 9 before her. But Madame Rose was far from done. She did not like to be ignored. She did not like to be studied. And something about Naomi's unshakable silence felt like a personal challenge, a form of defiance she couldn't comprehend. So she decided to turn up the heat. First, it was the missing uniform. Naomi returned to her small quarters to find it gone, replaced by a see-through lace nightgown. Naomi said nothing. She came out wearing a faded T-shirt and her own wrapper. Madame Rose saw her and smiled a slow, mocking smile. "Did you sleep in the gutter, or are you just dressing to match the mop?" The other staff chuckled nervously. Naomi simply bowed and kept working. The more she didn't react, the more unsettled Madame Rose became. Then came the accidents. Red wine accidentally spilled on a white rug. A crystal bowl accidentally knocked over and blamed on Naomi. Each time Naomi cleaned without complaint. Her patience was a quiet, steady wall against which Madame Rose's cruelty crashed and broke. Even Mr. Richards began to notice. One evening he saw Naomi sweeping near the garden, her wrapper torn at the edge, her face tired but serene. "Naomi," he asked, his voice low, "are they treating you well here?" She paused and looked at the powerful man. Then she smiled, a genuine, weary smile. "They are treating me like life treats many of us, sir, but I will be okay." That night, Mr. Richards looked at his wife. "Why is that girl still here? With the way you treat her, anyone else would have quit." Rose took a slow sip of her wine. "She's still useful," she said, but even she could feel it. The energy in the house had changed. Naomi wasn't fighting back with words or tears. She was fighting back with patience, with dignity, with a quiet strength that was beginning to feel more powerful than all of Madame Rose's wealth and anger, and that was starting to scare her. It was a Saturday morning, the sky heavy with the promise of rain. The house was unusually quiet. Naomi was sweeping the east wing when she passed a hallway mirror and saw a reflection that made her freeze. Madame Rose, seated on the cold marble floor, barefoot, her silk scarf half off, her makeup smeared as if she had wiped away angry tears. Naomi had never seen her look so human. Rose was staring at her own reflection, as if she didn't recognize the woman looking back. Naomi wanted to turn back, but something held her in place. She stepped forward. "Ma," she said softly. Rose's head snapped up. Her face, usually so fierce, looked cracked and fragile. "What do you want?" she snapped, wiping her face. Naomi bowed her head. "Sorry, Ma." She placed a small, clean, folded towel beside her on the floor and turned to leave. "Wait." Naomi stopped. Rose stared at her, her eyes red, her voice shaky. "Why do you stay?" Naomi was quiet for a moment. Then she said gently, "Because I need to. For my daughter." "You could get another job," Naomi smiled faintly. "Maybe, but my daughter's hospital does not accept stories as payment." Rose looked at her, truly studied her face for the first time. "You're not scared of me?" Naomi hesitated, then spoke the deepest truth in her heart. "I used to be scared of life, Ma, but when you face death in a hospital ward, holding your child's hand, nothing else can really break you again." Madame Rose looked away, a long silence stretching between them. Then she whispered something Naomi never expected. "They said I wasn't good enough." Naomi's brow furrowed. "Who, Ma?" "My husband's family, his friends. They said I was just a trophy wife, no substance." Her voice cracked. "I thought if I could control everything the house, the staff, maybe I'd feel in control of something." Naomi said nothing. She simply sat on the floor near her. Not too close, not to advise, just to be present. And for the first time, Madame Rose didn't tell her to leave. The next morning, a strange peace settled over the house. No shouting, no insults. The staff moved with a new lightness. That evening, Madame Rose did something unheard of. She said, "Thank you," when Naomi brought her tea. Then she looked at Naomi, her eyes clear for the first time. "You're the first maid who didn't try to impress me," she said. "You just did the work." Naomi spoke softly. "I am not here to impress, Ma. I am here to survive." Rose nodded slowly. "Tomorrow," she said, her voice quiet. "Take the day off, visit your daughter. I'll pay for the transport." The next morning, Naomi stood at the gate holding an envelope. Inside was 20,000 naira. Not a payment, a gift. She journeyed to the hospital, her heart light. She held her daughter, Deborah, fed her, and gave her a small, colorful ribbon for her hair. "Mommy," Deborah whispered, "are you getting the money to bring me home soon?" Naomi held her tiny hand. "Very soon, my love. God is helping us." What she didn't know was that Madame Rose had sent her driver to quietly follow, not out of suspicion, but out of a strange new curiosity. That night, Madame Rose stared at her own reflection. She thought of Naomi's quiet dignity, of her sick, smiling child, and then she did something she hadn't done in years. She cried. 2 silent tears that felt like they were washing away years of bitterness. The change in the house was palpable. Madame Rose began to say please. She asked Mama Ronk what spices she used in the stew. She started to see the people around her, not as staff, but as human beings. She gave Naomi another envelope, this time with 50,000 naira for Deborah's medication. "Pain makes us do things, Ma," Naomi had said gently. but it doesn't have to make us cruel." The sentence hung in the air between them, and in that moment an unspoken understanding was forged. Then one evening Madame Rose did the unimaginable. She invited Naomi to a women's luncheon, a high society event. "There are people there who can help," she said, handing Naomi a simple, elegant gown she had bought for her. "One of them runs a Children's Heart Foundation." At the event, Naomi stood by Madame Rosie's side, not as a maid, but as a woman of strength. Rose introduced her to the foundation's director, and a seed of impossible hope was planted. The call came on a Monday morning. The Children's Cardiac Foundation. They had reviewed Deborah's case. They would sponsor her surgeries, all of them, at no cost. Naomi dropped to her knees in the kitchen, weeping with a joy so profound it was painful. That evening she brought Madame Rose her tea. "Did they call?" Rose asked softly. "Yes, Ma," Naomi whispered through her tears. "They are paying for everything. Deborah, she might actually live." Rose's eyes softened. "I used to think strength was in controlling everything," she said. "But I watched you suffer quietly, serve gently, and still smile. You reminded me what real strength is." From that day, Naomi was no longer just the maid. She was the heart of the home. 2 weeks after a successful surgery, Deborah came home to the mansion. Not to the staff quarters, but to a welcome party under the mango tree. The entire staff, Mr. Richards, and Madame Rose were waiting. "Call me Auntie Rose," Rose said, handing a storybook to the shy, smiling girl. As laughter filled the yard, Naomi knew her journey was complete. She had come to this house with nothing but a nylon bag and a mother's desperate prayer. She had endured the fire, and instead of being burned, she had emerged as a light. She had not just cleaned a house. She had healed a home, one silent, patient, and prayerful day at a time.